Hey, Soraya, how's it going?
Hey Jeff, going well.
Good, good. So here we are again with a new episode on
Yeah.
a new reissue, right?
Yes, sir. So this is something that I know fans are really going to be happy with. Jeff, why don't you let our listeners know who we're talking with today?
We will be talking with members of the Long Riders. We'll be talking to Sid, Stephen, and Greg,
Yes.
talking about this record, Native Sons, but not this version.
Thank you.
No,
It's a
no.
beautiful re-release with lots of extra goodies on Cherry Red Records.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think for fans, this is really a wonderful contribution to the Long Rider catalog, and fans are going to want it.
Yeah, absolutely. As we know, Soraya, they've been working with Cherry Red and some beautiful box sets that have already come out. Um, we're not sure. Yes, signed beautifully.
Yes, and Tom signed in red down here.
Oh, we miss that guy. That's awesome.
Miss him, but so thankful that his contributions get to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he was pivotal on that release for
Yes.
sure. Um, but weird that the debut record is now being reissued when we already have State of Our Union and Two Fist Tales and the Filed Wild Songs anthology release. But we'll ask about that because I'm curious why we're going in this order. But we're looking forward to having these three guys on to talk about this reissue of my favorite Long Riders record.
I think for a lot of people too, it's that very sentimental favorite, but also just such a pivotal record in their catalog. So, Jeff, I say let's get to it.
Hi, this is Soraya.
And this is Jeff.
Our podcast is called Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme.
A podcast where the two of us play music that we like and share anecdotes and background about the tunes.
We hope you'll join our conversation. And without further ado, agruviar.
Let's get groovy.
All right.
Oh.
All right.
You want to
So,
get us started, Soraya?
absolutely. So, what a treat for our listeners today, Jeff. We have the wonderful Long Riders. We have Sid Griifn, Stephen McCarthy, and Greg Sowders here to talk with us today about this amazing. Hello, Jeff. Let me let you know. 1 week out, 1 week already, number 12 on the British indie charts. This beautiful Native Sons re-release on Cherry Red Records. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Nice to be here.
Thank you, guys. Well, we noticed that the band has had several box sets on Cherry Red Records, several of them.
I can blame Sid for that.
We can play that. We'll ask Sid about that. But here we are talking about this one. My copy of the 3 CD reissue has not arrived yet. I've got tracking information. But Sid, you already released this on Prima. So there's a version
Yeah, go on.
release an expanded version. But what we like to know is when a band releases an expanded edition a time or two, why do your fans need this particular version that is just released on January 19th of this year?
Well, it's got the all the demos, which weren't on any of the previous reissues of the same record, and it's got a live show from the live show that really got us going in Europe, period, much less the UK, from Dingwalls in March of '85. Dingwalls is across. It's about 100. It's about 50 yards from where the old Dingwalls was, but it's a new venue. It's not the Rat Hole. The other one was. And the other two things that I should point out, I don't have a copy to hand, is it's a different version of Masters of War that's on the earlier reissue of Native Sons on Prima Records, and it's a different version of As God Is My Witness that has been out to the public so far. This is the version, I think it's Steven on fuzz tone guitar as opposed to Sneaky Pete on pedal steel. So it's got those two demos have never been, those two songs have not been out before, and then you have a whole live album and an album of demos and stuff. So there's a lot more to this package than we've ever had the public exposed to.
Yeah, you said it better than we would have. We were going to say the same thing, but we wanted to hear that from you. So Soraya, we're interested in the order that it's being released, right?
Yeah, we wanted to ask you all. We noticed that the releases on Cherry Red have been out of the chronological order. Was that intentional, or is it just as you're compiling demos and other live shows that you've just decided, okay, this is time for this one, and then the next one?
They
Or-
had they had the rights to the island stuff first, and it took longer to get rights to the Native Sons material. So that's all that was. No skullduggery, just the way it was. They didn't have the rights to it. Now then, as Greg and Stephen well know, before COVID, we started working on this, and then COVID hit us for 2 years, and then Tom died. So it just took forever to get this one out. But the only reason is they had the rights to the island material first.
Ah, okay.
That answers
That
it.
makes
And to be honest, it's really late great Tom Stevens' Long Ryders Swan song, which we didn't really plan it that way, but when Tom decided to move his act to a bigger venue, it just made sense to finally finish this thing. So Tom did a lot of the archives work and the audio stuff and compilation with Sid, and then when it got pretty close to where it is now, Stephen and I helped out. Since there's some great pictures in there, some stuff we hadn't seen for a long time. If for the fans, you know, kind of connects to that time and space. A lot of folks we haven't really thought about for a long time show up in photos, and the cover. There's some outtakes from the cover. The great Ed Culver, who's really documented those times in Los Angeles with his photos. He was kind of like the 80s punk rock version of Henry Diltz. He did a lot of LA shots. We worked with Henry, but Ed took that album cover and you know, the actual cover's a little tip of the hat to one of our big influences. So you guys can either talk about that or guess who it is, you know, for you hardcores. But it was cool to the art concept to go along with the audio. It's otherwise there's really no reason to do physical stuff. Our fans in Europe collect CDs still. It's harder in the US. Vinyl seems to work everywhere, but you have to be thoughtful. Besides the audio sort of Easter eggs and treats, is to give the fans something to look at and hold in their hands.
Yeah, I'm one of those fans that like to have something to hold in my hands, whether it be a vinyl or CD. Greg, I'm glad that you both have mentioned Tom Stevens because we were wondering, being as this Native Sons was the first record that had Tom on it with the band, the first full length release. How was it for you as half of the rhythm section with Tom coming in? Did you guys click right away when you started working on the songs for this record, or did that connection develop over time? How was that working with Tom?
Man, thank you for asking. 'Cause, you know, Tom was literally my brother down there in the engine room. It gets pretty geeky down there by design. And, you know, I've got to play with different bass players over the years. And the first bass player we had on our EP was a guy named Des Brew, a British guy who was great, good singer, good player, but decided he just didn't want to be in the band. He had other stuff to do. So that was sort of a forced exit on our part. He just said, I'm leaving. And he was cool. So I had no idea what was out there. We had a couple other knuckleheads that made their way through the lineup, and you know, it happens. But when we found Tom, he was a mutual pal. We didn't really know him, but we knew people that knew him, and he was working at Tower Records in Los Angeles. So when he came to us, kind of like when we got Stephen McCarthy, it was like, wow, this guy's pretty good. Might be better than us. Sid and I always say we're two of the luckier guys in the business. You know, we had Stephen and Tom that made us sound and looked a lot better. But Tom, he was a rock and roll player. He had great pop influences, and he knew blues, he knew all that stuff, but he was a rock and roll guy at heart. And he really could pound out those 4 on the floor beats. That's the way I like to play. I don't like to make it too complicated. So Tom made me a better drummer by a mile. I like to try to stay on the backbeat, and Tom always pressed it a little bit. So that kind of push and pull thing worked really well. So it kind of let Steven and Sid do their thing on top of it. I'll let them tell you, but you know, about him as a singer and a songwriter, because Tom really could do a lot of different things. But just from that engine room point of view, God darn it, he made me a better drummer. And we work with Murray Hammond now from the old 97s, who's also a great player, but very different style. Tom just had that, you know, deep gut bucket kind of rock and roll feel that made everything work.
Yeah, Tom really was. I'll agree with everything you just said. I mean, he studied classical music, but he was as good at that as he was as playing, you know, garage rock and roll or country or, you know, Creedence inspired stuff. And he was the band's archivist, like I guess Bill Wyman, what might have been for the Stones. And Tom had all these tapes of rehearsals and shows and outtakes and demos and live things. So it was great that Sid and Cherry Red was able to draw upon his collection with his wife Elaine to help us get those tapes. And like Greg said, a swan song. This is his last influence on the band there with this release. So it's really touching that he's so involved in that with Sid.
Wow, I love that. Stephen, we were curious about the songwriting process. We're especially thinking about like Native Sons in the early days. I don't know if things have changed, but how did you guys come up with these songs? Would you bring in an idea or fully formed song? How were these songs written?
Well, I guess it could be anything in between there. And we've talked about this a little bit in recent times since I mean, Sid's been in England for 32 or 3 years. I've been back here for that amount of time. So we've had to rely, well, this is not Native Sons. This is, you know, nowadays we've had to rely on the internet or sending tapes back and forth. The great thing about being in Hollywood in those days is that we could ride over to each other's house. Hey, here's an idea. You might have the majority of the lyrics done for a song, but usually you rely on somebody else for a little bit, you know, chord change here or there, or Greg brings in a beat, or here's a thing left over from his last band, a ska beat that he throws into a song, which really made us a little bit different than everybody else because we had all these disparate influences of where we came from. So to answer your question, I think it's a mix of things. You know, I might have lyrics to a song and said, go, oh, well, here's some chords for a chorus. So it could go really any number of different ways.
Okay.
Not one set way to do it.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Soraya?
I also wanted to know, I had a question about these co-writing credits, specifically on Run Dusty Run and Too Close to the Light. So, you know, listening to what you just said, Stephen, you know, it was a mix of different processes and steps. And then for those songs where either it's a co-write credit or the band credit, like in Too Close to the Light, was that again just a mix of different processes or one idea building and then getting together and discussing it and keep going?
Well, I'll start off and the others can join in, but a song like Too Close to the Light was probably something that was the whole band was chiming in because it was something that was done like at a rehearsal and then carried over into the studio. And I think one of the other ones, yeah, and that was a great way to do it. I mean, if you could do that all the time, that would be the way to do it. You know, if you were a band like the band living in a house, you know, in the Hollywood Hills, and even though they didn't always share all the credits, you know, Robbie might have been the main dude, but once again, there's many different ways to do it, but Too Close to the Light is a great way for a group collaboration, the way that came together.
I'll also tell you you mentioned Run Dusty Run, which that it's kind of a novelty song that we had, except Sid was gracious enough to put my name next to it. I think it was a mercy co-write, as we like to call them. Because I mean, I've always said I'm a drummer and a music poet. I'm a song and dance man. I don't write them, I just play them, you know, or tell somebody else what to play when I'm feeling cocky. But that song, I mean, I might have said, hey, Sid, I think June rhymes with moon, but that's about it. You know, he Sid and Stephen and Tom always brought in great ideas, and then in fairness, I do get to decide if we're gonna dance fast or dance slow. That's usually the contribution. And or once in a while, you know, when they're starting, not so much back then. I was a kid, I was so young, and their little brother, I'm the baby. I know I don't look it, but I am. And But you know, now as we've grown up, we have more input in the studio. We work together in a different way, and everybody has different ideas. But I'll be honest, and I do work with a lot of different songwriters. Sid and Steven are two of the best writers I've ever worked with. They make my job a lot easier. And then when Tom threw one into the hat, it was always a lot of fun. So they're pretty good. They don't need my help too much.
Awesome. All right, Sid, I have a question for you, and no disrespect to the Long Ryders, but the Byrds are my favorite, and I think the best American band that ever came out. In the credits, it's noted that Gene Clark sang on Ivory Tower. I know you guys have spoken about this before, but we'd love to hear the story about Gene Clark coming in.
Well, it's been told so many times, and these past few weeks, I've told it so many times. It's incredible. It's, as I said, here goes. We put out the 10560 EP, and there were those of our crowd in Hollywood and a few of the fanzines of the day that said, "Oh, there's this band, Long Ryders, and they have an album out called an EP out called 10560. A lot of it sounds just like the Byrds," which I don't think then, and do not think now, that it did sound like the Byrds. But I heard it so often. I remember at softball talking to Steve. We played softball every Saturday when we all lived in LA. And I remember talking to Steve, and I said, "Why don't we get one of the Byrds and have a song that sounds just, consciously sounds like the Byrds?" So that was Ivory Tower, written by Barry Shank, who was initially in the band, and on bass. Des Brewer replaced him. And so that's what happened. We had Henry Diltz knew Gene Clark and knew him well. And so I talked to Henry about it while we were doing this Ivory Tower idea. And because we'd been playing the song live with Barry. And when Barry left, he was bummed. And I said, "No, we're going to put this song of yours on the album. I swear it." And I kept my word. And Henry knew Gene really well. And he got Gene. And I distinctly remember we paid him $75. I mean, I remember that like yesterday.
And a six-pack.
I paid $75. And I remember Stephen, how hoarse he was when he came in. And he was very disheveled. And it's very hard over here in England. He's got a real cult following going, as Stephen and Greg well know. And what was odd when I'm asked about it over here is I try and tell people no one gave a monkey's behind about Gene Clark in 1984. Nobody. I mean, he couldn't get arrested. He did an in-store at Aaron's Records on Melrose, and a friend of mine was the only person that went and felt so bad that he talked to Gene for a half hour. And during that half hour in Aaron's Records at Gene's in-store, no one else came up to Gene to have him sign anything. So my friend Bill, well, I don't know if Bill wants his name in this, but he stayed there for a half hour. And I like to think in some small way, shining that spotlight on Gene helped his career, but that may just be conjecture and hope on my part. But that's what happened.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that story. I know you've shared it multiple times, but I appreciate that. As a huge Byrds fan, can we talk about the 5x5 sessions? I've read and heard different things about that. Can you guys explain what the 5x5 sessions were? That is also included on this new reissue.
Every one of them can remember, can speak.
Yeah, no kidding.
I was hoping somebody, that one's a little hazier for me. I think must be you, Stephen. You're gonna.
Oh God, no, I'm not going to be. All right, I'm going to guess.
Wasn't it because we were going to try and flesh out 10560, make an album out of it?
That sounds right. Hey, Noah.
Hey, Murray.
Murray's not here.
Oh, wait, Murray's not here?
That's Greg, that's Stephen.
Hey, Greg. Hey, Stephen.
I know if he's practicing bass right now, Murray might be in trouble.
That was a ham.
Hey, you've got the other hat. I just wanted to tell Murray that I got Five Nights at Freddy's VR, and it is such an awesome game.
Murray's not here, but everyone else is
Right in
wearing
this picture.
glasses too.
Uh-huh.
Murray's not here.
By the way, this is what I look like when I'm after school. I take off the tie, I undo the top button, I take the things out and stuff.
That's how I feel.
That's my son. Sorry. Back to Stephen.
No worries.
We love that.
Yeah, I'm not going to be much of any help on this. So tell me the story.
We did. I think. Did we record those also at A&M, or can we release remember what's to? That's what I thought, right?
And Stephen grabbed Sneaky Pete, who was in the corner working for somebody else.
Now, I remember that. That was the greatest thing about that studio, A&M. Anybody who's watching or listening and who was around in those days and going over there. I mean, so many great albums were cut there. and you'd see Tom Petty going down the hallway, or Neil Young, or whoever it was. And I saw Pete find out going down the hallway, and I said, Pete, can you come and play in a song? He goes, well, I got 45 minutes. Can you do $100? I said, yeah, not a problem. So wouldn't you like to be able to go back and have that happen again?
Wow.
Yeah, people.
He charged us more than Gene Clark did.
Yeah.
This
We
is
didn't tell
true.
him.
This
And-
is true.
He also, if you guys remember at A&M, because obviously the A of A&M was Herb Alpert, he was always around. You know, it was his
Yes.
joint. It was a family business to him.
Yeah.
And he came into at least one session. He brought us some sweatshirts, like, "Hey boys," you know.
Yep.
And he always had his trumpet with him. It was like, "If you need a trumpet, I'm around." You know, offered,
Oh man.
which we should have got him to play. It would have been cool, but we probably didn't even realize how cool it was back then. We were just, trying to not mess it up. And Henry Louis was working with us. I can't remember. He wasn't producing 5x5, right? He was just on the native.
I think we were going to try and do it ourselves with that guy, Paul McKenna, who was the
That's
engineer.
right, engineer. But Henry Louis, as
Wasn't
some
there for-
he was a great, experienced, producer. He had done Flying Burrito Brothers, and he'd worked with Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
I think his story was he'd come over during just to escape World War II. He was a refugee, I think, and had joined the Musicians Union, I think, as a tambourine player, if I remember, just a way to get in, and around the Wrecking Crew and all that back then. And I think he played it with the Mamas and Papas a little bit, worked on some of their stuff, but he was great, and so I will tell you a great Henry Louis story. Back in my wilder days, might have been known to smoke a jazz cigarette every once in a while between takes, and just to get inspired. And Henry was no stranger to the magical herb, and he had brought some weed into one of the sessions, and
One of them.
yeah.
Good morning. He had a bag of.
And so I smoked
Sure.
a little bit with him, and man, that was it. It wasn't even a standing eight. It was a knockout punch. That was the end of the drummer for that day. And that was Henry. He always had a funny little hat on, and he just did his thing, and he was brilliant, obviously.
Super nice guy.
Yeah, man.
At the end of the original Native Sons pressing, some of the European people we licensed it to, some of those companies cut it off. At the end of Stephen's song, I Had a Dream, which is my favorite Long Ryders song, period. At the end of that song, we go, and Henry goes, "That was tight." People asked me who that was.
That's
It's
Henry.
Yes.
That's also Henry at the beginning of Is It Too Close to the Light? You hear this,
Yes,
he
go
had
ahead.
a huge baritone, and that's him kind of growling at the top of that track.
Yes.
I don't remember how we did. Did you just call him, or how did we get him? I don't remember.
I don't, it's funny because I played Saturday night as a solo, and people come up with these same questions, and I honestly don't quite remember how we got him. I know that Earl Mankey did a good job on the first EP, but he was getting really busy and being booked up, and we had a couple of questions about all that echo that was on 10560. No offense to Earl. So we were trying to find somebody else, but how we came up with the name Henry Louis, I don't know. I'm sure I would have leapt on it when I heard Flying Burrito Brothers, because I remember that he worked on both the Graham albums. But I don't know. Maybe Stephen
By the way,
knows.
they had also recorded at A&M, so it was all those kind of pieces for us, because we were always fans as much as players, and so it was exciting for us to have a guy that was part of sort of rock and roll history and working at A&M.
Yeah.
We were in way over our heads being there, but
Henry, I got there early. You all might like this story. I got there early because Henry had a diabetic thing happening. He had to have his blood sugar at the right level. So if it went up, if it went down, he didn't know what to do. And he would buy these rich pastries in the morning, and he would sort of count the calories, and then he'd eat. And he wouldn't finish the donut, or he'd even buy me some extra ones. So I got there early to eat pastries with Henry many, many mornings. And he told me he engineered the Bones Howe stuff for the Fifth Dimension.
Bones Howe, yes.
And the association, those hits that
Yeah.
you hear on 60s radio, association, Fifth Dimension. I'm going to think of some others when we've probably finished this phone call. But yeah, he really was the business. Oh, he did Van Morrison's Common One album, which is one of my favorite
Wow.
albums.
Wow.
Yeah, really talented guy.
But what great stories he had. He knew everybody. And Gene Clark, duh.
Ah, amazing. So you guys have mentioned the Flying Burrito Brothers. Can we talk about the cover?
Yeah, that's Stampede by the Springfield. And there was a thing going around. Costello's Almost Blue is a jazz record by, I think, Chet Baker and so on and so forth. There was a thing going on in pop music at the time where people in the know were taking an old album cover that, you know, their audience wouldn't recognize and doing an homage to it by mimicking it. And there was an article, I think, in the Times or something about this, and it went through like 12 album covers that, while a contemporary act, you know, and it's actually a mimicry of an album cover that went before. And I thought, well, we can do better than that. The Springfield had an album cover which Stampede was pressed up as an album and destroyed. And I had the mock cover that they sent out to Scholastic Books. I don't know if you know what Scholastic
yeah,
Books is. At your school, you picked off the ones you wanted to read, and they gave them to you at a discount because you wanted American school kids to read. Well, they gave Scholastic Books something like 40,000 of that cover, and I had one of them on one of my books. So I thought, well, we'll go this whole trip one better rather than just do an old Miles Davis or so and so album cover. We'll do one that didn't even come out, and it was fortuitous that we did do this particular idea because when that album came out, Andrew Loader, who I just spoke to a little while ago, Andrew Loader, Jake Riviera, Chris Difford's brother, Lou Difford, and all that crowd, Nick Lowe, Costello, at Demon Edsel Zippo Records, that's what caught their eye, the cover. And then when they found out we were good, they thought, we got to get involved with these guys. And that's how Native Sons really got going in Europe. Actually, it was through the cover as much as the music. Loader said as soon as he saw that cover, he thought, these guys got to be hip.
So they recognized it as the Buffalo Springfield.
Oh, they knew. Yeah, they knew. Which is weird because how did the Europeans know? It's a fairly obscure reference, but they knew. And Andrew Loader told me not today, but he told me just a week or two ago. He said, "Man, that was we got to investigate this band," and blah.
And that's also how we became known as basically a cover band, if you remember, Sid.
And those guys are very responsible for this record doing what it did, you know.
They are.
Yeah.
Well said, Stephen. They really are.
It really, I think the record got to be, you know, top 1 or 2 or indie record. What
Meat is Murder. Meat is Murder was in the way, Stephen.
Number 2, and then Dream, I think, hit number 1 on the indie charts.
Yes.
Charts, yeah.
Wow.
And to this day, when I see Johnny Marr, I haven't seen Johnny Marr since last June. I saw him and he talks about how much he liked Native Sons, and he says, yeah. And he didn't say it. He said how much he liked Native Sons. I said, but you guys were number 1 with Meat is Murder. You kept us out of the top spot. And he always sort of makes a sort of a shuddering motion. He's a good guy. He's a proper Long Ryders aficionado, Johnny Marr. How about that for a name?
Great guitar player.
Speaking of a sweet guy.
I'm glad to hear that. So speaking of great guitar players, Stephen, when I say your name, I got to think, Stephen. Sid, I blame you for that. But anyways,
somebody yelled it out Saturday night.
Oh, right.
When I played Final Wild Son, somebody yelled out, Stephen.
So Stephen, we've been talking about these studio recordings. I had a question for you. We know that Sid is a great performer, loves to be on stage. How about you personally? Do you prefer the studio or playing on stage?
Well, I think I enjoy both. Playing live, I mean, to get that feedback from the audience and the electricity, the energy, you know, there's no replacing that. So, you know, creating music and recording it is equally as cool. But, you know, I would say playing live is probably my favorite because you can really present what you've done, this original music to the audience and get feedback. I mean, they may love it or they may hate it. We used to play... we would open up for bands like X, you know, in our early days, and those hardcore fans would be spitting at us and flipping us. And we felt like, all right, well, we can turn tail and run, or we can hang in there and just lean forward. And by about, a third of the way into the set, we kind of got them. And by the end, they're jumping up and down. They don't want to kill us at this point. So
Amazing.
you
Steven-
can't replicate that in the studio.
Stephen, do you remember opening for X at the Pomona Valley Auditorium?
That's the one I'm thinking of.
And
We,
John Doe was so kind after it was over. He said, "Man, I was really digging it. 6 days in a row, but I thought they're going to kill you guys."
My guitar was wet with saliva.
we
I hate
came
to say
off the
that.
stage one night. We supported that band from Brent and the Alarm quite a bit. They were also really kind to us. We used to call them U3 because they were very, very
Yeah.
influenced by.
Very
Anyhow,
clever.
They were great. They let us ride on their bus and they always looked out for us. But we did play, I think it might have been at Rutgers. It was somewhere on the East Coast and it was a rough show. Their fans were not as receptive to us as, and I thought the show had been great because, back on the drums, you're a little bit off the front line like these guys have to deal with. And we came off and Sid and Steven and Tom were a little dour. And I thought, man, what's wrong with these guys? I said, the whole show was great. The whole time they were all holding up number one. I said, not exactly.
Was
It
that it?
It was a single digit, but it wasn't number one. So
Wrong
Was that at
finger.
Rutgers when they were throwing coins?
yeah, so I don't always have the best view, but I will say I agree with Steve. In the studio is great. It's a very in the old days, I would get I always got nervous because it was recording to tape and it was harder to fix mistakes. And if somebody looked at you the wrong way, you had to do the whole fucking song over. And now it's
Oh.
different with Pro Tools. And I think we're older and more mature, so it's a different discipline. But you have to wait, it's the moment of recording is great and it's inspiring to make music together, but you kind of have to wait to see if people like it or not. So to be honest, you have to kind of set your compass towards, this is the art we made in the moment and people may or may not like it. You have to be okay with that. Live though, you get your report card after every song. They either clap or they don't, they either move around, they either dance or they don't. So it can be frustrating if you're not having a good night, but that energy that Steven talked about, there's nothing like it. It just whatever you put into it usually comes back to you tenfold if you're lucky.
It's very sterile in the studio. It can be if you let it take you like that. And to get that transfer of energy, from the microphone onto tape. I mean, probably the best example I can think of is the rhythm and especially the vocal on Looking for Lewis and Clark. I mean, Sid is like, it's just, it's on 11, it's just burning up the mic. And so that's one of the greatest things we've done.
Nice.
That'll
All
be 10 bucks, Sid.
All right, we have a couple minutes left. We have one last question for you guys. So all of our listeners, please go out and get this reissue. Mine's in the mail, so hopefully it'll be here soon. So release January 19th of this year, the 3 CD set. As we've talked about, lots of goodies on it. But our last question, what's next for Long Ryders? What can your fans expect?
Well, I hope we make another one.
We
I don't
have
mean
half of an album. Don't we have half of an album left over from the last time?
Yes, sir. And I like all 3 tracks, so I'd like to crack on.
Or a third of an album.
And I know Cherry Red certainly wants one. They've asked several times what's in the pipeline. And I don't think an EP will cut it. I think we should make a record. Even if we just made like 9 songs and added the other stuff to it, I think we should do it.
We all love making music together. So that's it's really just when and where. I mean, it's the greatest thing. We've all, especially after we lost Tom, it's sort of, well, let's just see, it's like an experiment. Let's see how long we can keep doing this thing. And you can't really quit the Long Ryders anymore. We already went through that, when we came back together.
Yeah.
We've been together longer now than the first run,
Right.
by a long shot. And so, we lost Tom, so we kind of made a deal with each other. You can't really quit. There's only one way out, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And now we have Murray working with us, which is great. So we'll make more music together for sure. It's great to work with you brothers. And then ideally, I think we're going to be back on the road later this year over in Europe, which is always, they've been so kind to us. We'd love to play in America. It's just logistically a little more challenging, but that doesn't mean we won't do it. There'll be the right time and right reason, and we'll play in the US too. But to Stephen and Sid's point, we got a little more rock and roll to take care of.
Well, it's not news to the band, but it might be news to everybody else. I'm still working with this guy to take us to Japan, who wants us to come over, but he's got to have the time and the budget. So, and then David Williams, who's a proper promoter in Australia, wants us to come over. So I'm hoping and praying while everyone's still in good health, we can do Australia and Japan. It's a shame we've never been to two countries. One that has this, they're big in Japan cult thing that you can make a lot of dough over there and not mean anything in the rest of the world. And two, Australia, which is crazy, like Spain, for guitar bands. Insane we haven't been to those two places.
Wow. I hope that happens.
Yeah.
Coming.
Yeah,
All
we
right,
are.
you guys.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just agreeing with Greg. We are lucky to have Murray Hammond. I mean, his band, the Old 97s, they're about to release a new album, but in between their tours, we are going to get back out there and play. So thank you, Murray.
Thank you, Murray.
All right, you guys. We really appreciate the Godfathers of Alt Country. We're going to ask you about that, but we're running out of time. But anyways, we thank you guys so much for coming on, and for all of our listeners, please go get this 3 CD reissue from Cherry Red Records. Get it now. Again, we thank all three of you guys for coming on.
Thank you,
I've
guys.
enjoyed it.
Thanks,
All right.
Seth and Soraya. Yep.
Thank
I've
you.
enjoyed it.
We
Yeah.
appreciate it.
You guys take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take
All
care.
right. Bye-bye.
Hey, Jeff,
Yes.
did you ever think any conversation on our podcast would include a reference to Scholastic books?
No, but I don't know if you saw that about 6 weeks ago, I posted on my personal Facebook page. I had pulled that up for some reason. I don't remember why, but those were good memories from me, the Scholastic book catalogs. So I posted that on my page about 6 weeks ago. So it's funny that that actually came up. So
Hysterical. Look, we got, first of all, I can't, there's never enough time to speak with Sid Griifn, Stephen McCarthy, and Greg Sowders.
No.
Never enough time.
we had so many more questions that we
Oh
couldn't.
my gosh. But let me tell you, I absolutely love that conversation with the three of them. And I can only imagine if we had been able to continue, what else we would have seen. Let me see. We got information about, obviously, about this re-release, some great anecdotes, a visit from a family member, and this wonderful setup for more music and tours that can reach some very far away places, that where there are fans ready, willing, and able to, and hungry for the band to show up.
Very much so.
And I loved what Greg Sowders said at the end. He said, Stephen, Sid, and I, we got a lot more rock and roll to do. A lot more rock and roll to take care of.
I love that.
That gave me all the joy, all the happiness.
Yep.
Um,
And there's only
and
one way. There's only one way out of Long Ryders at this point.
yeah, you know, and it's it reminds me of I don't think you would know the movie Blood In, Blood Out, but it's like being in a gang. There's only one way out.
Yeah.
But this re-release on Cherry Red, think about all the extras that were added on. And I found it very heartwarming that the three of them said this is really finishing the project. It was really Tom Stevens' swan song. Anyone who knows, and I mean, we had the great fortune to speak with Tom more than once.
Yeah.
On the podcast, but anyone who's familiar with his body of work, with him as a musician, they know how much of a detail-oriented archivist Tom was, not only of Long Ryders music and his own projects, but of other things too. I mean, how did we get to know this bit about Tom was how much of a completist he was for the last.
Yes.
And so we're really familiar with how much heart, soul, thought went into the things that he archived and the files that he shared. I mean, he was super generous with you and with so many people that we know, of just sharing a lot of shows and files and things. I absolutely love that they completed this beautiful piece of work with so much that was added on. And I thought it was very poignant where Greg said, not only is there thoughtfulness about the things that we selected, the audio, but we had to be thoughtful about giving the fans something to look at and hold on to. And I think with projects like this, like re-releases, when the band can share that passion and say, we've put thought into it, we've added into it, and this is really a more complete version than what you've ever had. I mean, because we all know the album, right? We all have it. You have it, I know, sitting right next to you.
Yes.
But when they've added in all these beautiful pieces, and Cherry Red, I think, has been very, very good at honoring the vision of the band. I mean, how can you not love it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So none of these exist without Tom Stevens,
No.
right? So yeah, I don't know. I didn't think of that before they started talking about that, but the fact that this project, Native Sons, and it makes sense because Tom did all this. That was a project that he started too. So that was really cool to hear. So again, Tom's swan song.
And thank you to Elaine Stevens too.
Yes,
They
absolutely.
did mention that it was thanks to not only Tom, but his wife,
Yes.
Elaine Stevens. So thank you to Elaine too for her input and helping the band finish this project.
Yeah.
It's just great. Oh
And
my gosh. I have so many notes. How would you feel about Herb Alpert just kind of popping in, dropping off,
Yeah.
dropping off some sweatshirts?
Yeah.
Say, okay, boys, if you need a trumpet, I'm always around.
Right. Yeah. And in hindsight, it sounds like they regret that they didn't take advantage of that. But I'm thinking, no matter what kind of song I have, yeah, I need trumpet on this song. If it's her ballad standing right behind my back, like
And the story about Gene Clark, I mean,
it's a well-known story, but
absolutely. And I like the way that Sid tells it. But one of the things that I really tip my hat to the Long Riders, and really, to Sid, uh, you know, first of all, we need to find out more about these softball games that happen on Saturdays and who they were against. But can you
yes.
imagine just like going out to play a game and go, hey, you know what, Stephen, I think everybody says we sound like the Birds. I think we need to bring a bird and just have a track with that guy. Like, I love that sort of thought process of they say we're already sounding like, let's really sound like it. And then reaching out to Gene Clark and what is it, $75 and a 6-pack.
Yes. That's
I mean,
great.
and then what was it? Sneaky Pete was $100.
$100. Yeah. Right.
So it's just, there are all these stories and there's all this, there's so much more. There's so much more. And it really makes me happy when I hear them say, or to hear like Steven say, when there's nothing better than playing live, and Lewis and Clark is like, he said, Sid's cranked up to 11 and it's just the crowd's in and we're in, and he said, it's just amazing. Yeah. I just love hearing them all talk about playing together and wanting to do more of that, playing together and creating an album. This is a great band. And Jeff, you've said it often. If we're going to talk Paisley Underground, we have to include the Long Riders in the discussion.
Yeah, in my opinion, yeah, and that was one of the questions that I had that at the bottom of my list, the second half. So I had my questions that I definitely wanted to get in, and then the ones at the end that
I mean, in 40 minutes, they were gracious enough to give us 40 minutes. And I mean, we hit like the key questions that we wanted to make sure that we asked, and then we had a whole bunch more.
Yeah.
And we coyly said, "Oh, if we have time." But
Yeah.
no, the stories were so good. I'm so glad we got to
Yeah.
these, and um, I'm looking forward to what the band is going to give us next.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. Me too. Oh, Soraya, before we say goodbye,
Yeah.
what about Long Riders opening for X and Pomona and Steve's saliva-covered guitar?
That is something that's blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Blowing my mind. The crowd wasn't on it. And what about the anecdote about John Doe? I was totally digging it for 6 nights. I thought they were going to kill you, but I
Right.
was in it for 6 nights.
Yes.
Holy crap. And I'm just like, I'm thinking of that early version of X, just ridiculous insanity. And then you've got Long Riders, and Long Riders who really couldn't give. What was the phrase that Sid used? He couldn't give a monkey. People couldn't give a monkey's behind.
Yeah.
Jim Clark is. They're like, we're going out. We're going out. And we're not only are we going to go out, we're going to convert you all. And for Stephen said, yeah, my guitar was covered in saliva, but the crowd was in it. The one finger salute. The number one.
Not that finger.
There are so many good stories that this band has to share. And really, I'm not exaggerating. I think someone needs to just sit down with a tape recorder, press play or press record, and just start spitting them out. Now, I do find pretty interesting that no one seems to have recollection of the
5x5.
555 sessions.
Yeah. So
Or what was it that Steven said? That's a little hazy.
yeah.
We have hazy memories of that.
Yeah. So there's a version of the 5x5 on here. Then on the new one, I think the 5 songs might be a little bit different. I don't know the way that I'm reading it, but I've read different things, and there was questions. Some of my friends had questions about the 5x5, so they're like, make sure you ask about that. But I think Tom was probably the resource maybe to have more information on that session. But either way, I'm glad that we're doing what we're doing with the people that we're doing this with, Soraya, so we are able to get some answers to some of these things that might get lost in the future.
Look, we're seeing it, right? We're living in the moment where and it's already happened to us more than once, where we've had people on and and then they're not here to speak for themselves anymore. And I'm just so glad that we have recordings of this time with them.
Absolutely.
But I do want to mention, I wasn't aware that the songs where we have different versions.
Oh yes.
That's My Witness and Masters of War that I really did not realize that
I didn't either.
These were different versions. So I'm much more intrigued than I mean, I still want it. Mine's in the mail too, but now I want to hear this different version. I do want to hear it. So
yeah, for sure.
Jeff, there's just never enough time, never enough information. And I will say, there's only one of us here that's been knighted by the one and only Sid Griifn.
I like that. I like that you remind me that.
Our guitar. Only one of us has been knighted, and that's you. So I don't know. We got a lot more rock and roll to do too.
Yes, we do.
I don't do anything. Jeff does it all, but
this is rock and roll.
Yes. One finger salute, everybody. Number one. Number one.
Absolutely.
But yeah, thank you so much to the Long Riders, to Sid Griifn, Stephen McCarthy, and to Greg Sowders, and hopefully there'll be another opportunity for us to sit and chit chat with them again.
Absolutely. Yep. Let's hope so.
Oh boy, Jeff, I don't want to say so, but I think we got to end it. So, mi gente, agrubiar.
Groove on, Paisley people.
Don't give the one finger salute. Number one.
Excellent. Hey, Greg,
Hey, dude.
how are you?
Good. Good. I'm having a little audio freak out, but we're good now.
So looks like Sid is here, but I don't see any
Says
video.
that he's connecting to the audio, so it might just be.
He's going to be the Zoom call that's like a figure of a cat shows up.
That's right.
I'll be meeting with Murray for lunch on Sunday, so I'll let him know that.
Really?
I'll let him know that Noah says hi. So yeah, I'll be meeting.
Tell him
Like
that
the
Noah
game.
says hi. Tell him that the practice is bass. Steve and I are going to have some new tunes, I don't know, later this year.
Will do. Will do. All right, you guys, take care.
All
Murray
right.
loves this
Bye-bye.
band.
All
And
right,
Noah loves this band. Noah loves this band.
as he should. All
Take care, guys. Thanks again.
right,
My son loves those three guys.
Steven, this
Oh,
is
thank
great.
you. I'm sorry we haven't gotten that together, but we will make it happen if you still want to do it.
We do.
Yes.
We definitely do.
Okay.
Please. All
Thanks
right.
for bringing that
Bye-bye.
up.
All right,
All
you
right.
guys.
Bye-bye.